Whoops. I know it's not a big deal, but it's going to bother me.
Hi, everyone. Let's go ahead.
Whoa. Loud.
Test? Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Quick reminder before we begin that we've got an assignment that's due on Monday. Build-A-Blog's due on Monday, so hopefully you're making good progress on that. If you have questions, let us know today after we break up into small groups so that we can help you make sure that you're on track for that one. We got one more assignment coming after that, blogs, the last assignment for Unit 2, so that'll be the last responsibility of Unit 2 for you, and it'll be similar to Unit 1, the end of Unit 1. There will be a break in between, a 1-week break in between, and you will be expected to complete everything up to and including that blogs assignment before proceeding on to Unit 3. So I don't know when the actual hard deadline is for that yet, but it's still, I think, at least 2 or 3 weeks out. So you still got time, not time to panic yet. But please keep us posted on how you're doing. Please let us know if you need some help. We want to help you. We can't do that if you don't ask, though. So please let us know what you need. Any questions about upcoming assignments, due dates, scheduling, etc.? Any questions? All right. Let's go ahead and get started on today's material then. We're going to do a quick little review session, hop into the walkthrough. It's another kind of sizable walkthrough today, actually. So the review session I'm going to keep maybe brief so that we have enough time to do everything that the walkthrough is going to ask us to do here real quick. All right. What is a session? Can somebody describe what a session is to me? What is a session? I'm sorry? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's a dictionary. I'm glad you, that was going to be one of my next questions, was what data type it is, right? So it's used to save data. In particular, what do we use it for? Why does it exist? To remember what exactly? What?
Saving the email so that you know the user signed in.
So I know who's signed in, right? In other words, it's an object that we can use to track information as a person moves from page to page, right? It's a way of keeping track of information for one person as they move from one part of my website to another, because without having some structure like that, some dictionary, some session information, it's difficult for me to know, right, who you are, or it doesn't have to be who you are. It could be any information that you want to be stored from page to page for a particular user. So you could remember, this person clicked this particular button. You could store that information in the session if you wanted to, and remember that later on a different page of the website if you wanted to. In more technical terms, you'll actually see sessions referred to a lot when talking about websites. It's actually any kind of connection that lasts between a client and a server within one domain. So if I go to a page like Facebook, for example, Facebook has lots of different pages, right? Tons and tons and tons of different pages. But as long as I'm on the Facebook website, no matter what pages I go to, that's all part of one session. And Facebook will remember all the stuff that I do within that one session. So on a general level, we see sessions all the time when we interact with websites. And so then another part of the session was this idea of a secret key. What's a secret key used for? What's that about? Part of hashing? Hashing the session data? We're getting in the right ballpark, yeah. It's used as a way to encrypt data back and forth between your users so that somebody can't sit in between me and the server and see the information that's being sent back and forth. This is really important for when we do things like user logins, right? Because one of the things I'm going to be sending back and forth is my password. I don't want that password to be viewable to the outside world, so we need to do some work to protect it. And actually, this secret key, since it's being used to encrypt our data is also now worthy of being protected as well. We need to keep that information. It's called secret key for a reason, right? If anybody else has our secret key, they'll be able then to use it to unlock the data that's being sent back and forth potentially. So, and when I say encrypt, I mean it much in the way that you did like the Caesar and Visionaire stuff. They're not using Caesar cipher to encrypt your data. It's a little bit too simple of an encryption scheme. We have much more complex ones these days. But it's the same idea, taking the data and making it look like something else. Cool, all right. How do I create a function that runs for every request? What am I gonna see in the code? How do I create a function that's gonna run for any page that I visit? A before request. So I would see that, I would create my function, right? And then I would annotate that with the before annotation. And then what is an endpoint? We saw this as well. So it's linked to another part of our page, right? The endpoint is very similar, although maybe not exactly the same as which part of our apps? Rhymes with grout. The routes of our page, right? The various places of the page that I can visit. Those are all various endpoints. And so those were used in conjunction with these functions to do things like direct people to a login page if they haven't logged in already. So I can only view, for example, certain parts of my site if I have an account, if I've properly logged in, etc. And so we can write a function to check that. Are you logged in? Okay, you're allowed to see this site. Are you not logged in? Okay, you can't see this site yet, but I'll send you over to the login page so that you can log in and then try to view this content. Message flashing, what's that about? The name actually kind of tells us what's going on here. You guys have seen it, I'm sure. Anytime an error happens, for example, it'll pop up a little status message on the page, right? It's an example of a message flashing. It feels kind of similar to sessions in a way, right? Because it's tracking information from one page to the next. Although it doesn't use sessions to do that technically. We're going to see an example of that in the walkthrough today. All right, here's the big one, the complicated one actually. Relationships. So the very last part of the prep work for today talked about relationships between our models. And so this goes back to the database concepts that we've been talking about, right? We want to have relationships between our models, and those relationships will also be reflected in our database, correct? So what kinds of relationships are we usually talking about in this context? One-to-many relationships are going to be almost always entirely what we are using. And so how do we actually set those up in our code so that the ORM knows how to treat those models properly? I'm sorry? We have to set up the primary key and the foreign key, right, on our models. And then we also need to do what? Yeah. The relationship function. So we're actually going to tell the ORM that there is a relationship between these two models. They'll actually point at each other, right? The one side will point to the many side, and the many side will point to the one side. And so then when I insert a new object into the database, insert a new model into the database, it will know to grab the appropriate foreign key for that model and insert it into the database accordingly. We're actually not going to see this today. It's not part of our walkthrough, but we are going to see it very soon. It is going to be coming up. We have enough to do in our walkthrough today, I think, without including relationships, but we will see this come up again. We'll review that at a later date. Before I hop over to the walkthrough, are there any questions about these high-level concepts? We're going to see the first few things in today's walkthrough for sure. Any questions before we get started? So what we're going to do in the walkthrough today is actually very, very similar to what you did in the prep work. So if you followed along with the prep work and you understood what's going on, hopefully today will be pretty straightforward. If you had some questions about the prep work, then hopefully today will give you a chance to get those questions answered. We are going to add users to our Flick List application. And we're going to provide ways for users to register for accounts and log into accounts. And later on in Studio, you'll actually be providing, I think in Studio is where you'll be doing the login and log out functionality, if I'm remembering correctly. So we have a list, we have a to-do list. Here's our to-do list for today. It's actually quite long, but the first thing on our list is we need a user class to represent users in our database. So that's going to be our first step. Where am I going to put that? Anybody have any ideas about where that class should go? Under the previous class. So I like keeping all of our models in the same place. So let me go ahead and open up the code here. I'm on the walkthrough 7 branch, right? If you haven't switched already, if you're following along with me, I'm on the walkthrough 7 branch. So this is where we left off last week. And if I look at main.py, or remember one of the things we did last week was we created a model for a movie. We now want to create a model for a user. So I'm going to come over here and start setting up that model. And the next thing that we need to decide on are what values this user model needs to do its job. So what are the values that I expect this model to have? An ID, so that's pretty much a given. That's almost always going to be the case. And you can even follow the pretty standard template for this. It will work for the vast majority of cases that you're going to be working with. What else do I expect a user object to contain? Username, we're actually going to not have a distinct username, but we're actually going to do it by an email address. But you could actually have both, right? Or you don't even necessarily need to require an email address if you don't want to, right? That could happen. We're going to use email address for today, so I'll make an email column. Oops. Okay. And what should the type of this be? String. And we'll say some large number there. Any other properties you can think of for this guy? It should be unique most of the time. Most websites don't like you registering multiple accounts with the same email address. There are some exceptions to the rule, but in general, one email address per account. So we can actually enforce that on the database level by saying that this has to be unique. And the way to do that is to say unique equals true. This is a unique column. Yeah, what's up?
So if, like, instead of an email, they require you to have a username and an email, but they're not using the email as for logging in, then you could possibly have multiple usernames with all of the same email.
You could, yeah. I mean, so the question was if we were using usernames here, right? You know, if I have both a username and an email, now typically I would expect the usernames to be unique as well. So only one account per email, and then I can only use a username one time. So if somebody gets my name before I get it, then I'm out of luck. I got to pick a different one. That's usually how it works. But you have the flexibility to, you know, allow various combinations of those things if you want to. You can mark them both as unique. You could say that people are allowed to duplicate usernames if you want to. You could say that people are allowed to duplicate emails if you want to, or any combination of those things. That is your choice as a developer. And then what else do we need? A password, all right? And that'll be a string as well. We'll make it large enough. Should I mark password as unique? No, that's a terrible idea. That would be a very weird thing to see on a website. If any website ever requires your password to be unique, you should run far, far away from that website. That would be odd. All right. Can we set it to not null? Sure, we can. How do I do that? How do I set something as not null? I think it's just not null equals true. Is there an underscore there? I don't remember. Might have to look it up. No? Might have to look it up. Hang on. I don't remember how to do this off the top of my head, so SQL alchemy, not null. Tell me how to do it. primary key, where's not null? Nullable, oh, okay. Nullable, there we go. Nullable equals false is the proper syntax for that. There we go. I knew there was a way to do this. I didn't remember the exact syntax, so, you know, look it up. That's fine. All right. This should be fine in terms of the properties, the fields that I expect this model to have. And so now we are, if we look at our other model down here, we're going to want the same general kinds of stuff. I'm going to need a constructor, and I'm going to need a way to do a string representation of this, probably, right? So let's go ahead and make a constructor. And the typical questions apply here. What should the parameters be? So of the fields that you see here, which ones should be passed into this constructor, do you think? Both email and password. I don't think I want to create a user object unless I have both of those things, right? So I'm going to pass them both in. And that makes this constructor fairly straightforward. We'll say self.email. Oops. I forgot the what now? Oh, I sure did. Thank you. Equals email, self.password equals password. And for the last one, we can probably just copy this function here. Remember, this is just to get a string representation of the function. Or of the object rather, I'm sorry. So I'll just put the email address in here since I know that's unique. That's good enough for me to distinguish one user from another user in this particular case. And we have our model. We have our model. There's some other stuff that we need to do though before we can actually put this model to work. Like what? What do I need to do before I can put this model to work? Before I can start creating user models and putting them in the database? So I'm not even worried about the relationship for today. We're not going to touch that for now. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't. So I do have the database from last time, right? We're using the same one from last time, but the database from last time doesn't have users in it, right? So I need to make sure that that table exists before I go on, right? I need to make sure that that table exists. So I'm going to have to fire up MAMP, which I meant to do before class and I forgot. That's okay, I'll do it now. Oh yes, I know. You like to complain. We'll start up MAMP and then we'll tell it to make this user table for us. Takes just a second. There we go. I'll fire up PHP my admin. Oh, I suppose I could just go to the command line and start doing it that way. Here, Python. No, just Python. So from you are correct. Source activate Flask end. Python. All right, from DB. So what am I importing now? From DB. From main, import DB, movie, and now user as well, because I want to incorporate both of those things into my database. Whoops, did I not save? I guess I forgot to save. That's my bad. Let's try that again. All right, fine. I forgot to save my work. That's why it was happening to me. So I have to quit out of Python now and try again. Okay, there we go. Make sure you save after you added the model to your file. And now I'm going to go ahead and drop everything. So it's db drop all, I believe. And then db create all. And now you see it's actually spit out 2 create tables statements, and you can see that it followed what we set. So password not null, that's good. Got that right. There's the email address. It's labeled the email address as being unique, right? So all this stuff is being set up just like we specified, using what we set up in our model in the Python class. And I can go into PHPMyAdmin now and see that I've got 2 tables, movie and user, although because I had to recreate the database, they're both now empty. If I wanted to, I could create some samples to some sample users and some sample movies, but actually what we're going to probably do next is provide a way for us to register a new user, which should help us insert stuff into this database anyway. So that's our next step. Before we switch over and start doing that, are there any questions about what we've done so far with this user model? So we did talk about relationships in the prep work today, and one thing that I'm not going to do right now, but actually could and perhaps should be done, is define the relationship between user and movie. What do you think that relationship should be? We said it's going to be one to many. Which one's the one and which one's the many? User is the one, so one user is going to have many movies, right? Many movies on their list. So if you wanted to go through and set up that relationship, that's how you would do it. We're going to do that at a later time. We're not going to touch that today. We're just going to focus on logging in and stuff today. So let me check my to-do list, make sure that So the next thing that we're going to do is work on user registration and then also logging out as well. So you can see I need new routes for this, which is probably what we're going to be looking at setting up next. So let's go ahead and make routes for registration and for logging out. All right. I'm going to scroll down here. This is where my route handlers go. So I'll go find a spot here. This is as good as any. Doesn't really make a whole lot of difference where you put it. So we need a register route. And so the registration page is actually going to kind of pull double duty for us, right? This is almost a recap of user signup, the assignment, user signup. I'm going to have a page, or I'm going to have a page that just shows the form for users to fill out the information that they want. But then we're also going to need to perform some validation on that stuff. That's actually something that we're kind of saving for you to do in the studio. I'm not going to do a lot of validation right now. But you'll get some practice doing some validation in today's studio. And then, assuming everything has gone well, once they've successfully registered for an account, we need to make sure that that user is in the database and log that user in so that they can start using our website. So that's sort of our goal for now. Let's go ahead and make a function. I'm going to call this function, sorry, just referring to my notes here, register. And so actually I just mentioned, right, that this page is kind of pulling double duty. I've got a page where I'm just going to show the form. What kind of a request is that if I'm just showing you the register form? It's a GET request. If I'm doing the validation, then I'm going to get here via post request, right? How do I indicate that this route is capable of handling both? Yeah, I'm gonna say methods over here, and then I'll put both. Oops, get. I don't know if the capitalization matters or not. Maybe it does. Get and post, so it can do both. But then how do I check and see what's going on inside of the function here? How do I know which one I need to do inside of the register function? If request.method. So if it equals get, I feel like that's pretty straightforward, right? If it equals get, what do I want to do? I just want to display the form. That seems pretty easy. I don't have a form yet. I don't have a template for that. So, all right, let's go ahead and make one. I'll go ahead and return render template. And our template's probably going to be called, what, like register.html? I don't have this template yet though, right? So let's take a second to go ahead and make that. I'll come over here and in my templates folder, I'll make a new file called register.html. And this is going to look very similar to what you had on your user sign-up stuff, right? I need a form with a few fields on it. Well, actually, before I even do that, what am I going to make this template do first? This is kind of a review. I'm going to use the base template, right? So extends base.html. I forgot my percent signs, sorry. And then I'm going to replace the content block. This is all review of stuff that we've seen in prior classes, so I'm going to kind of keep this a little bit brief, and then we can go ahead and start, you know, making our form here. So where do I want to send it? What's the action going to be? The same page. We're going to send it back to the same page. I'm going to have the same page handle the post processing as well, right? So the action will actually be where we are now, register. And then the method is going to be post, almost always going to be post. Whoops. Let me get this out of the way so I got more room for my code here. All right, and now I just need to add in the inputs, the text boxes. So label email, inputs. I'm just going to type this out once and then probably copy it a couple times. If I can type. Type equals text, name equals email. I can take this and copy it a couple times for the other ones. So I'm going to have a password field and a verify field. Again, we've seen all of this before, right? This was very similar to, yeah, I gotta change these guys. Oh, and the types, yeah, should probably be password fields, huh? Password, verify. Okay, just one more input to go, which is a submit button. P. Register. All right. Slash. Okay. And then I just gotta end my block. I'll leave this up on the screen for a second in case you are following along with me. There's no surprises here though, I hope. Are there any questions about this piece? Shouldn't be anything terribly surprising here. Yeah, what's up?
Do you need this?
This way? Did I skip something?
No, on the other ones, like you have that slash greater than before.
Oh, you're right. I am missing the closing. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, well, so HTML is a little flexible. You're right. I think if I had left those slashes off, it probably would have been okay, but still more correct to include them, definitely. If I left these off, it might work, but your HTML would fail validation, meaning that it wouldn't be proper HTML syntax, which some websites don't care about, and you probably, sort of get a feel for those websites because they might look and feel a little junkier. Other websites care about that stuff very much, and we'll make sure their code passes validation before they post anything. So, alrighty. So this is a template, and let's just double check this template real quick before we go too much farther. Now that I have this template, I should be able to fire it up and visit this route and just make sure that the template displays the way I expect it to. Let's just do that real quick before we go any farther. And then we'll do the processing piece. All right, Python main.py. Whoops. All right, so there we go. Already had one problem. Invalid syntax. That's fun. Forgot to return? No, I got to return. I forgot something else. I forgot this guy and then this guy. I had two little typos on there. That's all right. These things happen. Okay, more problems. That's okay. Name error methods is not defined, so I think that's probably just another syntax. Yep. Equals. Cool. Let's see if there's anything else. There might be. Okay, well, it worked this time, so far. Let's fire it up and see. Let's fire it up and see if that template renders the way that I expect if I go to register. All right, it's not beautiful, but it works. It's okay. It'll do what we need it to do. Seems all right. All right. So the next thing that we need to do is set up the other end, right? So set up the processing for this form, which is going to require some work with our database. We're going to do a small amount of validation right now, and you're going to do some more validation when you get to the studio a little bit later on today. So let's go ahead and set that up. So that'll be in the same function. If it's not a GET request, it's probably a POST request. I don't know what other type of request it would be. So if I make it here, I'm ready to start processing this this form, correct? So first thing I need to do is what? I want to process this form. Step one is get the data out. I got to grab the data out of the form, right? So I'm going to grab the email, and how do I do that? Request.form, good. Request.form email. Okay, and then I'll grab the password, and we'll say request.form password. Notice I'm not grabbing the verification out. That's something I think that you're going to take care of when you get to Studio. But we'll do a little bit of verification right now, or I might actually sort of fake it a little bit, just for the sake of time. We could do a check to make sure that it's a valid email, right? Valid email should have an @ and then should have some kind of a website address on the end, .com, .net, .thing. So we could do a check and say, you know, if it is not valid email. And this would be a good case for us to do some error message displaying with the flashing message, right? So how do I do a flash message? We have to import it. So all right, first things first, we're going to go up top. I've already imported. I've got a bunch of imports up here. What else do I need to import? I need to import Flash and Session. Yeah, we're going to need Session a little bit later, probably, right? I'll go back down here. All right, so now I've got my imports. So how do I then? I must have passed it. Here it is. So how do I actually start to flash a message then? What do I need to do? I just say flash and then put in the message. So invalid email, right? And then what do I want to do after this? Probably. I want to redirect them back to the form so they can try again, right? So that would just be a redirect to, oops, return. Come on now. Redirect back to register. There we go. Okay. So this does require us to have a function called valid email, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to cheat a little bit and just make a stub down here. Gosh, I cannot type today. And for now, I'll say just return true, accept anything you have. If I want to test the message flashing, I'll just set it to be return false, and then we can test the message flashing and see how that works. In practice, what would I do here? I would check to make sure there's an @ sign. I would check to make sure that it follows the correct format. For the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of fake it for now. And if we have some time later, we might come back and do it for real. For now, I'm just gonna fake it unless anybody is really mad at me about that. In which case, I'm still gonna fake it. Too bad. Okay, so what do I want to do if the email is valid? At this point, I know there's more validation that we could do, but I'm saving that for you. So at this point, I'm just going to assume everything's good. So what do I want to do if everything's good? What's the next? I'm going to create the account. So sessions are going to come into play. Anything else? When you say create the account, what does that entail? That's actually multiple steps, right? It needs to go in the database, right? It needs to go in the database. So in order to put something in the database, first thing I need to do is create an object. So I'll go ahead and make my user object, and I'll pass in the email and the password, right? And then how do I put that in the database? db.session.add user. And there's that word session again. Is that the same kind of session that we imported up here at the top? It's the same word. So it's interesting, right? Actually, the concept is the same. The concept is actually the same. The session that I have with the website is a similar concept to the session that I have with the database. It's just an open channel that I can use to pass information back and forth. I actually have two different sessions here though, right? I have one session from the website to the database, and I have another session from the user to the website. So there's actually two different sessions going on here, and I access them in slightly different ways. You can tell which one this is because it's tied directly to the database, right? The other one is for between the website and the user. I know it can be kind of confusing to keep track of which one is which, but they do represent pretty much the same concept. Was there a question?
If you think of the database session kind of like the staging area for Git.
Staging area for Git? In a way, I mean, you see the word commit, right? Which kind of makes you think of Git, right? It's a similar idea. It's a little bit different. The database actually has the ability to, undo things if I have a problem, whereas Git's more likely to just complain and make me fix all my problems, right? So there are some differences there, but I see the similarities that you're making as well, for sure. So I added my user, and actually, speaking of commit, that's the next thing that we have to do, right? So how do I set it to the other session? How do I tell the session between the user and the website that this person has been logged in? What do I do there? Session, square brackets, because it's a dictionary, right? And then I get to make up, I can put whatever I want to in this dictionary. There is nothing stopping me from putting whatever data I want to. But in this particular case, we're going to say a user's logged in if the session contains their email address, right? If I find their email address in the session, then I will consider that user to be logged in. And so by doing this line of code right here, we are effectively logging this user in. Yeah? Sure.
Would it work the same way you simply use email variable?
It would. Yeah, it would. Yep, the email variable is exactly the same. Yep, you are correct. And so then if they successfully log in, the last thing that we probably want to do, at this point, we're basically done, right? So the last thing we'll do is send them to the home page. All right, we've written a lot of code. We've written a lot of code. Let's test some of it out. Let's test some of it out and see if I can properly register users. I think we still have some more work to do. In fact, I know we do. But I don't like to go too far without testing our work. So let's go ahead and test some stuff out and see what works and what doesn't. Okay? So I'm going to go back to my page here. I'm going to refresh this registration just for fun, and I'll type in an email address. Probably shouldn't put my real email on here because now I'm going to get a bunch of random YouTubers emailing me stuff. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Type in a password. Type in the same password again. I've already forgot what I typed. It's too long. Yeah. Well, my allergies are killing me today. I don't know about you guys. It's bad. It's real bad. So I'm actually not doing any validation on this. I mean, I kind of faked it a little bit, right? But I'm not really doing any validation on this. So it should not stop me from making this user, right? This should accept the user and create the account and oops, all right, so that's okay. We got okay. So valid email takes 0 arguments, but 1 was given. What happened? Anybody know? Yeah. I didn't actually pass in, I should have had a variable here, right? Yep, that's what happened. That's what happened. Or another way to think about it is up here you see that I had a value inside the parentheses, but it wasn't expecting that. It wasn't expecting me to do that because I didn't tell it that was coming. So that was my bad. All right, let's try again. I got to go back and do the registration again, I think. All right, cool. We'll just refresh the page real quick, type in the stuff again. I'll make it much shorter this time. Okay, different error, that's all right. The session is unavailable because no secret key was set. No secret key was set. Whoops. So what should the secret key be? Let's talk about that for a second. I mean, how do I set the secret key? I'll put it up here at the top. How do I set the secret key? What do I do? There was a secret key generator. Is it just app.secret-key? No? Or is it app.key? I can't remember. Underscore key, thank you. Equals, and then there was a secret key generator that you could use online, but really in practice, right? Anything could be used as a secret key. It's not going to stop me. This is a terrible secret key. This is awful. And actually putting it in this file is also awful. I think the prep work talked about that a little bit, how you shouldn't expose this secret key. You should keep it secret, very, very, very secret. But for the sake of learning and development, we're going to let it fly. So let's try again. Now that we fixed our secret key error, try one more time. All right, so I got a different problem this time. Duplicate entry, oh man. So what happened? What happened? So the unique error from the database happened, right? It's saying it already has an entry with this email address, but wait a second, I thought we haven't successfully done this yet, right? But think about what happened when it failed the last time. It failed because of which line? Because of this line. This is the line where it failed, which is after. So it got added to the database, but then it crashed. So now that I tried to add it again, right? If I go to the database and I look, and I see what's in the database, I would actually see Don't look at that. That's not my password.
Well, that's another too to talk about.
Yeah, storing passwords in the database like this, oof. We're gonna talk about how to do something about that in a later class. That's not for today's class, but later on we'll talk about how to properly store passwords in a database. So it's already here, right? It's already here. So, you know, if I want to actually test out the rest of the code, then I'll need to use a different email address, right? Need to use a different email address, which I can do. I don't have to use a real one. In fact, I probably never should have used a real one in the first place. Where did my page go? Did I close? Oh no, it's here. Real email at email.com. All right, cool. So now we can actually test this out. All right, cool. And it took us to the right page, correct? Took us to the right page. So that seems to work. And if I go check my database again, I can see that I've got another user in here, right? Cool. Okay, let's check the message flashing because we did that as well. If I want to check that, I have to do something else first. I have to say that this is going to fail. So I'll set that to be false, and then I'll go through, and now it shouldn't matter, you know, whatever I type into the email box, it's going to fail, whether it's a good email or not, right? So good email, and then password doesn't matter. This should fail no matter what, and so I just want to make sure that the message is flashing, and it didn't happen. Why not? I didn't put it in the template. I only got half of the equation down. I got to put it in the template. Got to put it in the template. So we're actually going to put it in which template?
Base.
Base. Why base? I want to be able to flash messages on any page, right? And base is used for all of my pages. So it's a good place to put the message flashing stuff. So let's go to base, which is here. Okay. And I'm just making sure that I've got my notes up here. All right. So how do I include message flashing then as part of my template now? How am I going to do that? I'll put it right here under the header. How do I check to see if I need to flash a message on the screen? The with block. Good. With. I make a variable, messages. This can be called whatever I want, right? It's just a variable. Equals, what am I doing? Get flash messages, good. I'm sorry? A category? No, a category is not actually required. You might do that as part of the studio today when you start doing multiple forms of validation, but for now, this should be fine. And so what's the next step? So it's possible that I don't have any messages, right? It's possible that I get flash messages and there aren't any. In fact, if things are working smoothly, then I wouldn't expect any messages here. So the next thing to do is actually check to see if I have any, which I do with an if statement. If messages. If there are any messages to be displayed. And now actually we have to take into account the fact that there might be more than one, right? I can show more than one message at a time. So messages is technically what data type? It's a list. It's a list. So I need to treat it accordingly. So I'll go ahead and make a list in my HTML as well, right? Make an unordered list, and then I'll write a loop to iterate and print out each of the messages in the list, okay? For message in messages, let me move this out of the way so we got more room. I'll make a list item for each message. and the for loop, and then end the if statement. And then end the with statement. That was actually a pretty big chunk of code, right? Just to get a message to display on the screen, or multiple messages to display on the screen. The good news about this is it's pretty standard, right? It's a pretty standard thing to do, so you can take this code and reuse it in many situations. Okay. All right. So let's test it out. Let's see what we got going on. Now, did I save it? I think I did. Yep. Let's test it out. Oh, shoot. Get flash messages undefined. Whoops. Get flash messages, plural. It's plural. It's plural.
But it does have the EDA on the flash.
Yes, it does, yeah. That's what I've got here on my notes anyway. It's plural. Let's try again. All right. Whoa. Kind of worked. Invalid email. Okay. Refresh. Type in some junk in the box. Register. Invalid email. Cool. Say. Oh no! Don't say that password. Invalid email. And it takes me back to this page so that I can start trying over again. Cool. Yeah, what's up? Oh, okay. I was about to ask if anybody had any questions, so yeah.
So like, using Flash,
That's correct, yeah. Uh-huh. Right. Mm-hmm. I would argue that so if you're comparing this against what you did for user signup, I would argue this is a little bit cleaner because passing those empty strings around, leaving those empty placeholders in your code, I think takes up a little bit of unnecessary space. This is a lot more flexible. I have one method that can handle however many messages I want, whereas with user signup, every time you wanted to add a new error message, you had to create a new place for that error message, right? And even write a lot more code for that error message, whereas this case, I can just say flash and then type in a message, yeah. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you had to pass the messages in. No, you don't. A call of flash and you're done. Yeah, you can move on with your life. Yeah, so this, you could argue that the downside of this is maybe slightly more complicated since I have to add that loop and if statement into my templates, which is a fair argument to make, but it does save you a bit of complexity overall, I think. Yeah. Question?
So though you always use this method, they always do right top.
They do, but I mean, it's up to me. I can put them wherever I want to. I just put them in that spot in my template. You can use categories, yeah, if you want to, yeah, to help you split them up even more. Yep, for sure. Absolutely. All right. We still have some work to do. Let's take a look at our to-do list. We're getting pretty close, actually. So we did this. We've actually done this. We haven't done the logout piece yet, and then we haven't done the this wall. We did this last part with the flash messages. So we haven't done this login wall that monitors logged in, unlogged in users, and we haven't done the logging out stuff or the links to log in and register. Why don't we do this piece and the logout next, and then we'll do the login wall to wrap up. Okay, so our base template. If the user's logged in, we just want to display that user's email address. If the user is not logged in, I want to display links for them to log in or register. That's the idea here, right? So we know it's going in the base template. How do I do that? How do I incorporate that into my base template? What do I need to say? Close. So I do need to bring the session. I do need to bring the session. How do I check to see if something exists in the session? Yeah, it should. So if the value's here, it'll give me whatever that value is. If the value's not here, what's it going to give me? None. Yeah, it'll just give me none. So if the user is in here, right, then I can go ahead and display that information, correct? Oh, whoops. Otherwise, I want to display a way to log out or actually I want to display a way to log out here, right? Because they're logged in, so I need to display a way to log out, correct? I need to display a way to log out. So one way we could do that is by just putting in a link. So I can actually put in a link to, we don't have this route yet, right? It doesn't exist, but we'll create one in just a second. If they're not logged in, then I want to include links to the login page, which does not exist. That's actually something that you're going to create as part of the studio. So that's not something that we're going to do right now. So that'll be a broken link for the time being until you get around to it for the studio. But this register link does exist, so. I should capitalize this, I guess. Ah, okay. And if. And that was a pretty simple thing to make. I should be able to go now. Am I logged in? I don't remember actually if I am or not. I mean, I guess I am because I never logged out, so I don't see why it wouldn't be, right? So if I'm logged in, I should be able to just go to the page and hopefully see that I am in fact logged in. Let's see. Uh-oh. I got some syntax going on. That's okay. I forgot a % sign or something. I forgot a something. What did I forget? Was it that space? Is that all it was? Might have been. All right, cool. Ah, yeah. So, all right, the formatting's a little bad, but you know, whatever. Real email at email.com. All right, cool. This logout link doesn't work yet, but we can fix that. Let's do that next. Let's make this, if I click this now, it's broken because that we haven't made it yet, right? So let's fix that next. We're almost done, actually, I think. All right, so what do I need to do? Make a new route. Let's do it. Log out. And def log out. How do I log somebody out? I just delete the session. Delete session, or specifically delete the user value from the session, right? This will remove the email address from the dictionary. And then where do I want to send them? Probably somewhere, I don't know. To the sign-in screen. Oh, I need a slash here. You're right. Thank you. Return, I don't know. Redirect slash, I don't know. I guess that's as good a place as any right now. Until we have a proper login screen, which we don't. Like a login screen would be a good place to send them, right? But we don't have one. So until we actually make one as part of the studio today, this is probably the best we can do. Let's give it a try. I'll refresh. Did I save? I think I saved. Let me just make sure. I did. Log out. Okay, it's switched. You see at the top, it's switched. It now says log in and register, right? So that part seems to have worked. I think there's only one last thing on our to-do list, and then we can wrap up this walkthrough. It's this idea of a login wall. So wants to prompt them to create an account if they don't already have one. So if I try to visit a page that I'm not, that requires me to be logged in, I want to actually say, no, you can't do that. I'm going to send you to like a registration page or something along those lines, right? And make you log in or register for an account. Okay, so that'll be our last little piece for today. How do I do that? This is the before request piece, right? So I'll say app.before, is it underscore request? Let me see. It is. We'll require them to log in. So how do I want to phrase this, right? How do I want to check to see if they're logged in or not? What do I want to do? Allowed routes. We're actually going to keep it more simple than that. There's only one page that I want to allow them to access, which is the registration page. If they're not logged in, they can get to the registration page, but that's it. They can't do anything else, right? So I need to check two things. I need to check if they're logged in or if they're on the registration page, right? Or actually, I need to check for the opposite of those things. If they're not logged in or they're not trying to go to the registration page, then I need to send them to the registration page. That's my goal, right? So if what? How do I check to see if they're not logged in? Or I could say, yeah, how do I check to see if they're not logged in? I want to see if the email is in the session or not, right? So if not, it's very similar to what we did in the template, right? If not session user. All right, what else? Or how do I get the endpoint? Could it be and? Kind of depends on how you want to phrase it, right? Request.endpoint equals what endpoint? Register. That's the one that I'm allowing. Or, I don't know. Wait, if they're not logged in or not equal to register? Should be and? Okay. And not? Well, I switched this to be not equal, so that'll work, right? That'll work. All right. And then if neither of those things work, then I want to send them to the register page, right? What's up? I don't have one. That's the biggest reason. You're going to make one as part of the studio. Yeah. Once you do, then this will be part of the studio. You'll have to figure out how to update this to make that work. Yeah. It's a very valid question. I'm saving that one for you guys as part of the studio today. So now if I go back actually to my web page and I try to go to the main page, it should get mad at me. All right, so I've got a key error user. Now that's probably referring to, I would guess, the session, right? Let's see if we can figure out what this error message is telling us. Right here, key error user. So what's going on there? So it's telling me this key doesn't exist. I think the way that we're checking this is a little bit off. I think there's another way to check this.
User not in session?
Yeah, something like that. If user not in session. something like that. Let's see if it likes that a little bit better. All right. I tried to go to the main page, and it sent me to the registration page, right? I can try to go to any page that I want to, and it will send me to the register page. But if I go to the register page, it doesn't care. Okay. Now, it would be good to show the contrary. So if I make a new account, we want to make sure that it will still let us go to the other pages, right? It's not going to block us. So let's do that real quick. Just to prove. Invalidate. Oh, God. My bad. Okay. So if I successfully register, all right, cool. I am now able to go to my various pages, and it's not stopping me from doing that, right? I can go ahead and use the web page as normal, and it's all working properly. So we've successfully set up a way to keep unregistered people out of our website. Cool. Yeah, of course. We made a lot of progress today. Before I turn you guys loose on today's studio, are there any questions? Yeah, what's up?
I do have a question. In regards to session
Uh-huh.
and kind of security with that, is there a best practice as to what type of thing you want to?
You can actually store, honestly, whatever you want in the session because that secret key is protecting you. So as long as you're confident that your secret key is secure, you don't have to worry about what you're putting into the session necessarily. That being said, I would expect it to be pretty rare to store passwords in a session. It's actually not really a good idea to store passwords anywhere other than your secured database. So that might be the one exception that I would say to that particular rule. But anything else, I'd say is probably fair game. IDs, sure. I mean, if you need to, right? As long as you've got a need for it, that secret key should protect you.
Are we going to touch on like how to store the
So I guess I can touch on that real briefly to wrap up today, but in general, I wouldn't put it directly in the code like this. I would store this secret key as an entirely separate file and then write some code to read in that file, which we just don't have the time to get to at this particular moment. That's the proper way to do it. Just add an additional layer of abstraction, or you could maybe even take it a little farther and stash it in a database as well. Yeah, like somewhere off to the side where it's not going to be easily accessible. Yeah. But then you got to make sure your connection to the database is also secure, right?
I thought I read somewhere reading through other materials. Somebody talked about
Sure, on the server. Yeah, sure, you could. You certainly could. So an environment variable, we've actually seen those before. Probably when you were installing Python and stuff like that is when I would have expected you to come into contact with them. You might have seen an environment variable called path, which is probably the most commonly used environment variable. But basically an environment variable is a variable on your computer. So any program on your computer can access those environment variables. You could use a secret key for that as an environment variable if you wanted to. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to turn you loose on the studio. You've also got Build a Blog to work on, so use your time wisely. We'll regroup at around 8 o'clock like we usually do and talk about today's studio. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.